Florence Planning and Zoning Commission after I get done wrestling with this thing. This is a regular meeting. Today is September 27th, 2018, and the time is 5:30. Sir, would you take the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Pranzo.
Present.
Vice Chair Frost.
Present.
Commissioner Schopel.
Present.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Present.
Commissioner Simmons.
Present.
And Council Liaison Hawkins is also present. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Moving right along, this is a discussion for approval or disapproval of the minutes of the regular meeting conducted on August 16th, 2018. Mr. Frost, I'll let you take this. I was not present.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, we did receive some comments from Vice Chair Frost as far as making corrections. We have made those in this, so unless there's anything else that you find, then those are already included in the minutes.
And I noted that those changes were made, and so I would move for passive approval of the minutes of the regular meeting that we held on August 16, 2018.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Motion carries. Moving right along. New business. The Planning and Zoning Commission will adjourn for regular meeting. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Okay, I will make a motion. The chair will make a motion that we adjourn for a work session. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned for a work session. Mr. Harmon, I'll let you take the lead on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a little bit of background, and you're all familiar with this, but more for the record, some months ago, we identified through you and with a presentation to the town council a number of areas of the current development code that needed some massaging based on incomplete data, out-of-date information, lack of appropriate cross-referencing, a number of different areas. This is the first draft of the update to the parking code. The black is what is currently in the code. Red is just initial thoughts coming from staff. We did get some comments from Vice Chair Frost. Those are in there in light blue. And this is, to be casual, just to work our way through it. We're not married to suggested ideas and thoughts. It's just whatever you all feel most comfortable that is going to best suit and best serve the town of Florence as a whole. Also, I do not anticipate we're going to get through all of this in one evening. If we do, wonderful, but if we don't, we do have next week's commission meeting, which is our regularly scheduled meeting. As of now, there are no action items pending, other than approval of the minutes from this meeting, which we hope to have prepared and ready for that particular one. Also, as we go further into the month, I'm not anticipating any items for the second October meeting. I haven't heard of any. If we do get through the parking code tonight or next week, we are prepared to bring the draft sign code back to you in a work session to go over.
I need to stop you. We're getting ahead of the agenda.
Well, kinda. All right, I'll get into that summary later then. But related to the parking code, you know, we don't have to get through it in one night. Once we do get through, though, the entire working draft, we will make those additions, corrections, modifications, deletions based on your direction through the work session. We would bring that back to you for kind of another work session or a tacit blessing. But we would still have to go through a public or a community meeting process prior to having you hold a public hearing on any form of adoption. So this is a lengthy process. It is governed by state statute as well as the town's own development code as far as process. But We'd like to get through it. I think, these are meaningful, or this is a very meaningful place to start, judging from some recent past action items that the town has had to deal with.
Great.
With that, do you have any preference of how we go through it? I'm just presuming basically line by line or section by section.
What I'd like to do is go page by page.
Yeah.
And the commissioners, once we're on that page, if they have it marked up where they have a comment, then we'll bring that comment forward and just move along like that. I presume everybody has read it, so
Okay.
that is my assumption. So let's just move along and see what we bump into, because I'm sure there'll be places where it'll require some discussion and some understanding. So with that, page 1 is mostly definitions. Do we have any comments on page 1?
Yes.
Commissioner Frost, please.
I see you've captured most of my comments. I noted that definition M, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, nowhere in the document is that defined term used.
Oh, nice going.
Good catch.
This whole section, the definitions?
Yes, but it doesn't define anything in the document. That term is never used in there. So I don't know why we're defining it.
Well, we'll go back and double check and see if we missed something for the document, and if we didn't, then we can eliminate this.
And I just might have missed it, but I searched and couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments to page 1? Moving right along.
Mr. Chairman, just as just a point of clarification, and for the most part, we didn't, the stuff that's in red, we didn't, make it up. We did research it with other communities and whatever, so we may want to change wording, and it's not anything that we've invented or pulled out of our heads. It's stuff that's been used in other communities. We researched several, and like on the electric vehicles, we pulled those out of other people's codes and things of that nature. So there may be some hiccups in there.
Well, and you bring up a good point. Just to use an analogy, you walk through a door in a house. We are so trained that we don't even think about it. The doorknob is at 36 inches.
Mm-hmm.
When you go from community to community, there are norms that people just automatically expect it to be that way, whether it's parking or ADA bathrooms or whatever it happens to be. There are norms that people just go through life, don't even realize that, this is the same in every town. So those are the kinds of things that we have to look at and say, okay, have we stayed inside the norm, and does it fit in Florence, of course. Okay, let's move along. Page 2, I'm going to start on that one. I need to understand the hierarchy in this town, and I'm going to give you, for instance, under letter O, right there up at the top, it says the town manager interprets the meaning and intent of the general plan and the development code. I don't agree with that. I think that should be the community development director.
We've discussed this, and it's your call on how you would like to word it in here, but if you just go through the existing code, it refers to community development director, it refers to planning director, it refers to town manager or something. I mean, it's all over the map. And that's because there's been department title changes over the years, things like that. And so the simplest was take the top of the pyramid, name them, and if you notice at the very next section, A of the next item, it's town manager or designee. And in this case, the community development director would be the designee. But in a few years, if titles change or something happens, then that becomes obsolete too.
Right to my opening statement, people get used to norms. And this doing a dance with title changes does nothing to change the work we do.
That's correct.
Okay? So you are the professional. You are the person who is responsible for bringing forward the general plan for 2020. I expect you to know it better than anyone else in this town.
That would be the goal.
Right. So when it comes to the interpretation of the meaning, you would be the person with the background knowledge as to how we got to that general plan. So who better to do the interpretation than the guy who did the groundwork to get you there?
Well, I will take that as a compliment, and we will so change that throughout the text.
Okay.
This
Excuse, I'm sorry.
I just want to throw this in. This would be akin to somebody going for a driver's license and having the governor have to sign for it.
Well, or the governor's designee, but no, I get your point. That's fine.
I'll add my amen to all that too, because I highlighted every spot here and said why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, don't steal my thunder. Okay.
So I'm good.
No, I will take that as a compliment, and we will so change this. Not a problem.
Now, on paragraph A, it says no building permit being the key word. That brings me to the building official, not the town manager. Somebody has to be responsible, departmental-wise, in issuing these things. It says no building permit shall be issued until the applicant has presented satisfactory evidence to the building official, no designee, that he or she owns or has otherwise available for his or her use sufficient property to provide required parking. That's the building official. This does not rise to the level of a town manager.
Okay.
Moving right along.
Do you want me to comment while you're there?
Yeah, go.
Okay. So, I would leave that as the community development director, just because the community development director would know parking and whatnot. Most building officials understand the perimeters or the parameters of the building itself, but know very little about anything else, in my experience, as far as parking requirements and whatnot. But I know that in a typical hierarchy, that the building official is not going to issue a permit until it is signed off by the other people in the group.
That's been the process even before I got here. And now the building official is under me in the community development department. Actually, when it comes to reviewing building permits, it actually goes through a process. It's initially taken in. It comes through the planning portion next. So one of us would have to sign it off for setbacks and site plans and those types of things. Design review, or comes to the P&Z, for design review, and the building plan review is the third item in the hierarchy. So that would be appropriate either way.
Well, what you're telling me is there is a symbiotic relationship that exists between yourself and Mr. Allen.
Absolutely.
Planning not to exclude you, planning department and the building official, okay? What throws me is that you're issuing a permit, okay? And so I need to understand how that, when you use the word permit, I immediately think building official. Now, does the planning department have permit authority?
Structural permit authority? No.
Okay. Where we need to define this, who does? I don't want to define it to the point where you guys end up with your hands tied.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to, let me put it this way. I need to understand whose authority sits where.
Well, basically, the permit would not be issued unless planning approves the site improvement portion of it, and that's what this refers to as the site improvement portion.
Okay, so then this is going to turn into the community development director, not the building official.
Yes, that's what I think.
Okay, I'm with you now. I understand it.
Okay.
Let's see how many more times I can trip over myself. Okay?
Keeping me honest.
It's just keeping everybody honest.
No, I think it's a good exercise.
Yes.
Actually. Under B, last sentence, it says plans shall be submitted fully dimensioned and to the town manager? No. Fully dimensioned to, I would imagine, again, this is a relationship between the building official and the community development director?
Correct.
But you would take the lead on this because
Correct.
this is parking. So again, this turns into the community development director.
Yeah, and I believe you'll find throughout the text, any place we've used town manager based on this discussion, you'll want to change to community development director.
Yes.
Yeah, when you go to your word processor, just seek and destroy town manager.
Okay.
Right?
They actually have that button.
I know they do. I've used
I
it.
wish they called it seek and destroy, though. It would be much more entertaining.
I don't know how else to call it. That's what I've always called it.
Are you moving pages? Or we still-
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So any other comments on page 2, please?
Yes.
Mr. Frost.
Section E, about midway down, it says consideration will be given for up to 20% of the required parking be of a pervious surface to reduce heat island and run-on effects. What kind of consideration are you going to give them?
Well, and this was something we, had a brief discussion on in the past as far as the, trying to minimize heat island effect. Basically, they would have to demonstrate, as it says even further on in that paragraph, that it has to be of a significant thickness and design to withstand repeated vehicular traffic. I've been researching that. There are some pervious materials available out there that allow for storm water percolation through them that have been proven through testing. I forget the test. Is it ASTM?
I'm good on that, too.
Yeah,
I
okay.
understand that.
Anyway, there's materials out there, especially for parking. For streets and roads, not so much, because the not only the volume, but the speed of traffic causes a different level of impact than than you would have in a parking lot. There are materials out there. We were just providing the opportunity if somebody wanted to spend the extra dollars, because they are more expensive than standard paving, in order to use certain areas of a parking lot for part of their stormwater retention design.
So they would get credit for stormwater?
Potentially. Again, it would have to be engineered, and the reference to the town engineer is in here. They would have to actually go through a process.
That's why I asked, because it doesn't tell me what consideration. If it says 20% of it, that means that I get to count 1/3 of my stormwater retention requirement.
Oh,
that's on
okay.
that area.
I see the question.
I don't understand what consideration means, so.
We need to probably be more definitive on the wording then
Please.
somehow. Okay.
I understand the concept, just I don't understand the,
We'll look at refining that wording then.
yeah.
And again, this is just a suggestion. You may or may not even agree with it.
Well, there's some very specific and higher level maintenance required on porous pavements to make them stand up, particularly in our dusty weather, because they plug up really quick unless you use.
That's correct. This all started, the first time I used something like this was, 40 years ago in Tempe for a new shopping center. The part of the parking that was out closest to the arterial street, they wanted to combine into their stormwater retention, and back then they were using a product that Hastings Block actually was marketing, but it was called Checker Block Pavers, and it was you're familiar with it, I'm sure. It was a mold that you cast concrete in and then interlaid them in these areas that allowed grass to grow up incrementally. You had like a 3-inch by 3-inch concrete pier, pylon, whatever you want to call it, flat topped, with 3-by-3 grass inserts all over it. Those became problematic because primarily for anybody wearing heels. But the concept started there, and ultimately has resulted in the more impervious paving products that are out there now, which interestingly enough are still in the most part bituminous based. But they have created such a design factor on them now that it will allow water to seep through, not at the rate of a grass or DG lined retention basin. It's a much slower rate, but it does allow percolation. So we'll better refine it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on page 2? Okay, moving forward, page 3. This is the seek and destroy under F, paragraph 1. You're laughing. All right, now I've got something highlighted here. At the top of the page, under I, it says the use of an off-street parking space for the storage of merchandise, supplies, equipment, vehicles for sale or rent, vehicles used for business identification signage, or for repair of vehicles is prohibited. Off-street parking space. I'm trying to imagine off-street parking. I'm starting to get it now. Off-street parking space for public parking. In other words, if the building owner owns the parking lot, and he wants to park his truck in the parking lot that has his logo on the side of it, the way I read this would be illegal.
The way it was intended is for those places of business that, and I see, let's say, I'm familiar with the realtors. I don't know if they do it here, but I've seen other places where a realtor will have a small moving van, like a 16 or 18-foot U-Haul. And they will wrap it with a banner that has the name of the realtor and the company and all that kind of stuff, and then they park that in a parking place out by the street, which becomes a sign. And so this is basically referring to where you have required parking, it must be available for the public use. So if you start using it for storage of building materials or anything else, then you're taking away what is designated as required parking, which compromises the parking ratio requirements that we have for new businesses.
There's a lot of times when a business is going under construction or roofing or whatever, where the contractors will park their trailer
Yes.
or their trucks in those parking spaces while they're doing the construction project. And that may be days or weeks or even months, depending on.
Yeah, we have the ability to grant. There's a lot of flexibility built into, in this case, based on the chairman's point, to my discretion. And in the case of somebody is building or remodeling, then they can be granted a temporary, waiver on those types of things. That is no problem. This is after a business is open, you've got a full-time operation going on to help, make sure that the spaces that have been required for, part of their business remain open for their customers to use.
Well, just as an example, the Cocopelli Moon, if they should decide to rebuild it, and I don't know if it's rebuildable, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that parking lot right there beside it, between it and the old drugstore, they're going to have to park
Yes.
trucks in there.
Well, there'll be a trailer for demolition debris, all that. That's all fine. That's during the construction phase.
And that'll be given an
Yes.
exemption for that.
Absolutely.
And just so you know, I think you misinterpreted my comment. You sucked it into there in blue. It was a question, what about temporary construction, which is what we're discussing here.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So if an owner needs to use the parking lot as a place to park his whatever truck.
His day-to-day vehicle?
Yeah, a business vehicle, then that needs to be an area designated that is not considered as a part of the public parking.
Typically, the employee parking is part of the parking calculation. So if it's his day-to-day, vehicle, like let's say you have a HVAC business or something, and you have a few vans that you disperse in the morning and all that, that's usually part of the parking calculation to begin with, because it's based on square footage and employees.
Okay, I just don't want anybody getting behind the eight ball.
Right.
Because they,
Right.
all right, and one other comment. You've included PUDs, plan unit developments. I don't think we've ever done that before.
Where did I do that?
Under.
Oh, under the standards?
Yeah.
PUDs, by their nature, allow flexibility in codes. And that being said, there still needs to be a starting place for them. For example, I won't use parking as the example, but let's say we've gotten a request from somebody like a cell tower person. How much can we put a cell tower? How tall can we make it in a PUD? So we actually look at some of the underlying use in that particular location that he wants to go to give us the maximum height of the building that's allowed in order to help refer to them what they can do. So we try to get people to understand that a PUD is not a carte blanche to do anything you want. There's still an underlying zoning based on the land use designation within that portion of the PUD. Right. Now, if that being said, they can still ask for exceptions as part of their PUD process.
All right, well, PUDs are so subjective, it's really difficult to nail things down. I mean, they can be approached from so many different ways.
And I agree with that. One of the things, though, is fairly constant in PUDs is if you put in a Safeway, it's going to require the same amount of parking than if you put a Safeway in a business 2 zone. Right. So this kind of puts everybody on notice that we are, going to be holding a specific standard as best we can.
Okay. And not to embarrass anybody, just to put it on the table, a PUD is a planned unit development. And what it is, or how it comes about, is a developer gets into a bargaining conversation with the town, such as Anthem, and they come up with what is separate and apart from the town's ordinances as a guide in how that development is going to move forward, rules of the road, basically. So it removes them from someone who's building a house on an empty lot and puts them in a category where they have their own set of ordinances. This is the guideline, but a planned unit development is a bargaining, something that comes about as through bargaining between a developer and the town itself.
And I think an excellent example of that is Anthem, and an example that was probably one that's easiest to demonstrate is we have setbacks for single-family residential. And when you come to a corner lot where there's a street side and an interior side, we have an extra 5-foot requirement in the typical R16, or extra 2-foot requirement in the R16 area if you build on an individual lot for that street side in order to help buffer from street noise and things of that nature. In Anthem, those areas all have some form of landscaping that has been part of a tract that's, you know, adjacent to the sidewalk area. So their street side yard setback has been reduced to 10 feet in those areas where they have those landscape buffers built in. So it adds a level of flexibility to their process as they develop.
Right. Okay, any other comments on page 3?
What about section C, number 2, lights illuminating a parking space? What about, you know, we're trying to keep the night skies from interfering with the
Observatory.
the telescope,
Observatory.
huh?
Observatories.
Observatories, yeah. God, I'm having a senior moment. But anyway, yeah, what about making sure that they don't make it go down? Because
Yeah.
we're required to do that when
We can add some,
lights on Main Street. You know, that was part of the requirement from the state to keep the lights shining down. In other words, so you not have a light that's shining in every direction.
actually that, and we can add some wording in here to clarify that, but that's one of the things that we're actually researching right now is how we're going to require parking lot lighting. Right now, this code is very, excuse me, kind of lax in covering that to any degree, as is our lighting code. And so without getting too far ahead in the agenda, that is one of the next items you're going to be seeing is the lighting code. Lighting, signs, and parking all intermesh as far as many of the requirements on how, you know, landscape in a parking lot, how it's lit, where the signs are related to parking and visibility on the intersection of the curb cut into the parking lot off the street. All those things are so interlinked that you're going to be seeing them basically in sequential order and in the very near future. So we can add language to here. One of the things we will be adding to here as those other codes come along will be the cross-referencing that refers them to the lighting code and that the lighting code refers them back to the parking code.
So the lighting code will be a separate code by your definition?
It's because it covers athletic fields, all kinds of stuff.
This doesn't require it, so there probably should be some language here just supporting the lighting code.
Right.
That it's required, and the lighting code will also have minimum lumens for people's safety,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Correct. As well as even light types.
Right.
You know, because that whole state of the art has changed the last 10 years radically.
And then part D, it's just not a good sentence. That second read, if only single ingress and egress lane then 32 feet is required. At least put the word, if only a single or ingress, something just to make it read better.
Fine.
Any other comments on page 3? Moving right along. Page 4. Okay, I have the seek and destroy in paragraph 4. I have a question mark next to this, and I don't even remember why. Joint use or non-simultaneous use parking may be approved if a permanent parking easement is recorded in the form approved by the town attorney.
This is just language that we drew from another code. We can word that any way you want.
Well,
Basically, it's to allow, this isn't so much, for example, like a Safeway Plaza parking lot at Anthem, where that's all, you know, it's in each individual business, square footage is still calculated to get the overall amount. But where you have non-competitive uses, for example, a church next to an office building, that's the best example. They can share the same parking lot because the hours of the office building almost never conflict with the hours of the church. And so here they could have a joint use parking facility which reduces the overall paving total, but they would have to have it in some kind of a written non-revocable agreement, and we want our town attorney to approve it before it was recorded and approved.
okay, in the form approved by the town attorney. It's not saying that he has to approve it. It says it has to be in a format. that
It's
he
a type of a legal form, yeah, that he's acceptable to. As far as the calculation, that would still be something that would be under community development's purview.
But granting an easement would be between two private parties. It really doesn't have anything to do with.
Well, they would have to, as part of their development, they would actually have to ask for a waiver, if you will, to the parking requirement. This allows them to do that without having to go through a variance process.
Okay. All right.
They're just trying to make it basically easier
Okay.
for them as best we can.
Offset parking areas may be approved by the town. That really is you. That should be, the town is so ambiguous. Like, if I'm on the other side of the fence and I say, oh, all right, I need offset parking, who's the town?
Okay.
So we need to define the town.
I'll take responsibility.
Okay. Single-family and two-family residential use, parking space location. No part of any vehicle parked in the front yard or a single-family or two-family resident lot shall extend over the public right-of-way. Now, this is in black.
This already exists.
Yeah, I know. I'm seeing that.
This is why I brought the easel. I want somebody to draw what that says, because I tried reading it frontwards, backwards, and sideways, and I couldn't figure it out.
All you have to do is drive down Willow.
Right.
You'll get it.
We have several streets in the Old Town area that there is excessive right-of-way.
Yeah.
When I say excessive, it probably goes, in some cases, 20 to 25 feet behind the curb. And in this area, I should also note, is not being overly heavily enforced because it's really excess right-of-way. And we've already started talking internally about getting the right-of-way we actually need and offering the excess right-of-way to the adjacent property owner for basically for the cost of the survey that it takes to identify it. We've done that with the Lions property not too long ago. That came through you for the infill incentive corps. Right. Willow is a good example. Central is a good example. Past our office, you'll see cars parked in what looks like their front yard when it's actually public right-of-way areas. In those areas, it's been kind of a policy not to overly enforce this, but we're also noticing now there are RVs showing up, people living in them, abandoned cars in them, so the enforcement of this is probably going to start ramping up, which will actually be a good incentive for us to get moving forward to get rid of the excess right-of-way.
Yeah. And
So I tried to draw this based on the description.
Yeah,
I couldn't do it.
I'm not sure how or where they wrote it. We can take a look at it and see if there's an easier way to say it. Yeah.
Just send me a drawing once you do, so
Okay.
visualize it, because I can't visualize it.
You know, it actually might be good as an exercise in the future as part of one of these work sessions. I don't know if we could do it by next week for parking, but I can show you what has occurred in what I call the Old Town, you know, the area we're in now, based on the original historic layout of the blocks. In the oldest area, where, you know, just south of where we are right now, around the historic Main Street, The blocks only had 4 lots.
Yeah.
That's why you see gaps in the street numbering system. You know, you go from 8th to 12th, or is it, I don't know, maybe 11th.
They took 2 shots at doing between 5th and 6th.
Yeah.
They didn't get it.
Yeah, and it's basically a mess. So over the years, a lot of street right-of-ways were abandoned back to adjacent lots or sold as individual parcels, and then over the years beyond that, some of those got combined, split, recombined, resplit, and there is the oddest configuration of lots all over the Old Town Central of Florence. And I do a lot of interpretations. I presume my predecessors have done a lot of interpretations on legal lots of record. We'd be happy to give you like a 10-minute PowerPoint just to kind of show you what we're dealing with, and it would include this.
Yeah, just give me a drawing so I can visualize it, because I can't right now.
Okay, recreational vehicle storage.
This one is put in there just to be controversial.
Well, you did it.
Good.
It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Not in the historic district.
Not in the old downtown, I know.
Oh, a solid 6-foot masonry wall. That's got to be softened. That needs to go backwards quite a bit.
I've got a 6-foot chain link fence around my house. It's been there for 30 years. And according to this, I got to tear it out and put a 6-foot mason wall because I have my RV sitting in the backyard or on the
Well, this would not be retroactive on anybody that already has it and it's fencing, but this has been brought up to us as maybe floating it out there, see what the reaction is. Obviously, right now, you can't do this in Anthem. That's under the, you know, the stricter guidelines about that area. I just kind of put it in there. It really also, though, relates to recreational vehicle businesses and parks. In that area, we do want to keep that kind of a standard in there. That we can put into that section of the zoning code, recreational vehicle parks.
Commercial.
Yeah.
Some people might want to put in I mean, if you're going to require any kind of fencing like that, limiting it to masonry, I think they should be able to, if they want to use cedar or,
Redwood,
whatever.
Well, but if you think this is even problematic, we'll just eliminate it. I just wanted to get it out there to make sure that if somebody asks us, that we discussed it.
Well, we're poising ourselves for development in the future too, and we need to account for that. We don't want to leave a loophole in here for a developer coming in and some mischief happening.
Mm-hmm.
I want to word it to where it pertains to new construction.
Yeah.
From this point forward, from wherever we ratify that.
RVs
Can do that.
can be a problem
Mm-hmm.
if, as you say, it's being used as a domicile. And also, when it's parked on the right-of-way near a street corner for extensive periods of time, it becomes a hazard.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see up the street. And you could find yourself nosing out
Right.
in order to, so there needs to be some language addressing those kinds of vehicles. They are vehicles, but
Well, let us play with the language.
yeah,
See what we can do.
we'd get the same way if somebody was parking a tractor trailer on the street.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
it doesn't work in a residential area for
Correct.
long periods of time.
And I'm not sure whether our street and traffic code addresses those, because that's in the right-of-way. This has to do with on the private property itself. The right-of-way area is actually covered under our traffic code, which is enforced through primarily the police department.
Well, to me, right now, when I look at stuff like this, I know where it's going to get enforced, in the
Mhm.
historic district. And if it's off the street and it's in the backyard, I don't know that any fencing is required. I mean, it's not a dumpster. The garbage truck is not coming there.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people live in the historic district because they want that latitude of being able to park whatever vehicle. Now, I know of one instance where a guy is engaged his sport is racing. He has a tractor trailer, and that's behind a masonry wall in a garage, you know? So we need to soften this up quite a bit.
Probably the way to address it, we would have to kind of provide an exemption section in the language or something like that. I'll have to get a legal interpretation on it, but we could exempt, you know, like for example, I think pretty much everything of what I usually refer to of Old Town is covered under the redevelopment plan. And maybe we exempt anything, you know, that is contained within that area, and it would relate only to new construction of R16 type, you know, housing or something. I'm going to have to come up with language. I'm not going to be able to draft it right now.
I just want you to keep in mind that a lot of people live in a historic district
Yeah.
because they will not live with an HOA.
That's correct.
Period. So if you start strangling them with HOA language, they're going to rebel.
Point taken.
The other point to take on this one is I lived in a neighborhood one time that a guy had a legitimate recreational vehicle behind a masonry wall, but it was basically up on blocks and it was being used for storage. So it was not a functional recreational vehicle. It was just basically a shed that became an ugly eyesore and was kind of a breeding ground for vermin. So something else we need to.
Yeah. And that's what we get into on parking them on the streets too. We usually figure by the time the cobwebs connected it to the ground, it was probably been there too long.
A question, how would you handle a snowbird having a mobile home coming back to live in the wintertime here?
You mean an RV?
Yeah, an RV. Are they allowed to be in the street to unpack?
Absolutely.
And how long can they be in the street?
Well, this would just said, I've seen it all different amounts of time, but this one says may be located in front of a wall for a period not to exceed 48 hours for the purpose of preparing for travel or prior to off-site storage.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's times, other places will do 72 hours. I don't think I've ever seen one more than 72 hours.
Well, in Anthem, they have 72 hours, and you must put cones up.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know if that's mentioned in here or not.
Glendale's.
No, we're not.
72 hours.
Yeah, and 72 hours is fine also. We'll work on language for that.
Okay.
But one of the things to note, though, Anthem might have their own HOA rules. We are not,
We do have HOA.
well,
yes.
but we are not in a position to enforce them,
Okay.
or, you know, anything related to that. So if the town wishes to do something that's less restrictive or more restrictive, you know, we're able to do that. So just kind of keep that in mind. We're not, you know, that's a total civil matter when it relates to an HOA.
And how about the other end, where they're going to leave and not go in their motorhome, and they wish to park it on public parking, they cannot do that?
No, they cannot.
Okay.
They would have to put it into storage.
If you go by the Alps, there are 4 or 5 that are over there, and store them over there.
Well, and in downtown, you can right now. Yeah.
You say you can't?
You can.
Okay.
Yes. That's quite typical.
City limits.
Pardon me, Bill?
That's in Coolidge city limits.
Oh, is that in Coolidge?
They came across, they
weren't supposed
used
to.
to have a gentleman's agreement, should have got it in writing, but they crossed over Attaway, and that, we always had an agreement they'd never come east of Attaway, and they did. They went over and they took from there, and I think up where, what's her name, used to live, Bobby England,
Yeah.
where her house is. They went quite a ways.
And when they first started talking about the freeway coming down, Home Depot bought a big section of land out there. So Coolidge jumped on it to annex that part so they could have the Home Depot. And that's why they violated the gentleman's agreement. And I'm from Coolidge, and everybody knew about the agreement that went back to the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Coolidge violated it.
Agreed.
They're clear down past Valley Farms Road, too.
Okay, moving right along. Any more comments on page 4?
Yeah, I have one comment. Under 6 up there, it says, off-site parking may be approved by the town if the parking area is within 600 feet of the associated business. That's a long way.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing.
6 on the top.
Oh,
of
up there, okay.
halfway down.
Yeah.
That seems like a gosh awful long way to have parking away from your establishment.
Yeah, again, this is language we just borrowed from somewhere else. 600 feet is like typically 2 city blocks,
Yeah, exactly.
but we don't have typical ones here. But, and if you feel that that's, too much, that's fine too. I'm not married to that number at all.
I would go with half of that anyway. 100 yards seems a long way, but I guess if they want to do it, but 600 seems a long way.
It is a long way.
Well, I can understand that if you have multiple level parking lots that are supposed to service a very big area. We're not in that position. Any other comments on page 4? Moving right along.
Town manager at the bottom there, but
We got a seek and destroy at the bottom. Yeah.
I got it.
Okay. Page 5. Paragraph H, all commercial, office, multifamily, and manufactured home developments shall provide a 6-foot wide sidewalk connection through the parking lot from the public right-of-way or public sidewalk, if provided, to the building entry. A 6-foot sidewalk, we need to define what size establishment with a parking lot requires a 6-foot wide sidewalk. This just says all commercial.
Yeah, good point. So we'd be talking about something of certain size or larger, I guess.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking more like the Safeway up there. You go to most new developments with a grocery store or a Home Depot, something that aligns with the front door, where you can go through the parking lot, get on the sidewalk, then walk directly towards the front door. That's the intent. So yeah, we'll look for a
but
sign.
would we ever allow something less than 6 feet? I can't see a 4-foot because you can't even pass people.
No, yeah, this is 6 foot is kind of intended because of carts. You'd have potential people with shopping carts passing each other, or
Thinking of people in wheelchairs.
Or
just
that
trying to get
also,
by
right.
people.
Well, you're even
Right.
talking multifamily, which is an apartment complex. Here, which we have right down on Phoenix, you've got the 4 apartments down there with the parking lot on the side. Off the main
Yeah.
sidewalk, you've got a sidewalk going up to it, and I don't think it's 6 feet.
Yeah, I think.
and again, we're talking about new development. But yeah, you're right. For a fourplex or something, it wouldn't be a requirement. We need to come up with a square footage threshold or something.
I think 6 is a
It's
minimum.
multifamily, doesn't a 4 apartment complex come multifamily?
Well, that's what I mean. We need to come up with a threshold for this.
I just think 6 is a minimum size that we could get by with because it's not really comfortable for 2 people to pass on a 4-foot sidewalk.
Okay.
6 feet is 72 inches,
Especially if they have a walker.
36.
Anything like that.
ADA requires 32. 36 is kind of like the norm
Mm-hmm.
for ADA entrances. So double that and you're at 6 feet.
Right. So that would be the minimum.
Right.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind as we go through this, we're not necessarily looking at just what we've suggested in red, but anything that's in black that's already in the code that you think needs to be changed, amended, looked at, or whatever, don't hesitate to jump on that also.
All right, and there, of course, there's a seek and destroy down the bottom.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments to page 5?
Yes.
Mr. Frost?
Very top line up there in red where it says, may be approved at the discretion of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do we have approval authority? I thought we had recommendation authority.
No, through the design review process. That's very specific.
Okay.
And design review is final with you unless it is appealed to the council for some reason.
Understood. That answered that question.
Okay.
In Part E, just below that, it talks about landscaping area and whatnot, but I don't see any reference as to how much landscape area is required per parking lot area, and that's pretty common in other parking lot codes, that if you have so many spaces, or if it's of this size, you'll have so many landscape islands equaling this amount. Again, to get back to the shade cover and try to deal with the heat island effect.
So we're looking at thresholds, basically.
Ratio.
Yes. That's pretty common in most.
And I'll take another look at the landscape code as it now is stated too. That there may be some references in there because we want to make sure that everything is consistent and cross-referenced accordingly.
Please, okay, and then under, it's been crossed out, but the alternative design standards, under number 1 underneath that, says, for each additional 2.5 increase in total landscape area exceeding the minimum required amount. Again, there's no reference as to what the minimum required amount is.
Good point.
For landscaping, so I just, and then I just pinned this in on the page. This is a reminder for me, and that deals with stormwater retention, because I've seen very poor situations where the developer, engineer, whatever, has put all their stormwater retention on the parking lot, and when it rains, people come out of Safeway or whatever the retailer is and go, oh crap, I got to walk through 4 inches of water to get to my car.
Walmart.
So I think we need to have something in there that either says the first inch or some number is retained off pavement, or the furthest parking spaces are the first inundated, or in the design storm of maybe it's a 10-year event, the parking lot can only have this much water on it, something there. Give some guidance, or you end up with the easiest thing and you get the crappiest thing for the people that are trying to use it.
Yeah, currently, the town requires all stormwater retention to be in a landscape area or a tract. But that's why we started talking about the pervious material to maybe allow some flexibility to that. So
So there's no stormwater retention allowed on pavement?
on parking right now, no.
Perfect. I'll scratch that out.
Any other comments on page 5? Moving right along. Page 6. Isn't page 6 wonderful?
And 2/3 of page 7, actually.
Yeah. And page 7.
Now, what we did in this area, it was just easier to strike out everything. What you'll notice is some of the ratios are exactly the same, but it was just easier to strike out all of it and just put in a whole new chart. So you'll see some areas that are somewhat new, other ones that are the same quantities and that we've already, shown, or that you already have in the code. So we can go through them however you would like.
And these numbers are basically, as the chairman basically talked about earlier, is kind of standardize us with other surrounding communities, so people kind of, if you're doing a bowling alley here or doing a bowling alley there, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, they're pretty close. We compared, I want to say 7, 8. Yeah, sorry. Mari compared 7 different communities, and any place where there was a major discrepancy, between all of those, we kind of looked for a mean or went on the upper side of the mean, because we have found out through experience in the recent past that we are way underparked in certain areas. And we ran into obviously a significant controversy over one of them in particular. And so we've tried to accommodate that. The other thing that I did notice in current code is there would be and I'm just, maybe if I can find one in a hurry, multifamily is a good example, or the schools, hospitals. They would have a requirement for, like the hospitals currently, it's 1 space for 400 square feet of indoor floor area. To me, that doesn't even remotely work, because you have public areas and you have private areas in a hospital. You have office staff, you have medical staff, all kinds of things. And that's why we're suggesting there's one for each bed in the hospital, because each bed is probably going to have a visitor. One for every employee based on their largest predictive shift. That's going to be their primary and daytime shift. And then, a minimum of 20 for emergency room services, because that's the one that's always in flux. This is one way to tackle it. I've seen it a lot of different ways, but this is just how we're kind of suggesting looking at these things, just to make sure that we're covering the employees as well as the public that are going to be using those facilities themselves. So that's probably one of the most significant changes that we're recommending we look at in here.
And then just a word from sad experience.
That's there for me, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, one of my friend's wife passed away, and they're having a memorial service for this.
Please, my condolences.
Okay.
No problem.
And Larry, while we're talking about that one of the things that I've experienced in the past is that, as you talked about with a hospital where they have shift work, there's always an overlap of about a half an hour.
Correct.
Where they pass off information, and so it's got to have largest shift plus a certain percentage, otherwise they show up and they can't park until the other people leave. And they can't because they got to have a half an hour overlap to hand off pertinent information.
You know, having recently spent some time in the hospital, I was a subject of that, as a matter of fact, and their shift changes are at weird times too, and my guess is they've actually figured out the best time to optimize not only the parking, but the ability to share information with the minimal interference and interruptions.
We just have to be careful with parking when there's shift and
Right.
they're passing off.
Okay, moving right along, page 8. Has anyone been brave enough to come up with a comment on page 8?
Mine are already there in blue.
Okay.
Just a note too, if you notice, we've added senior assisted living facilities. You know, most people, not most, a significant number of people in those do not drive. And so we did reduce the number required for that. A lot of communities just batch those in with multifamily housing. And quite frankly, you end up with a sea of asphalt that never gets used. So we did reduce that one down. And the same with independent living. Instead of requiring, you know, one space for every single bedroom unit and 2 spaces for the 2-bedroom units, things like that, we just came up with a ratio of 1 1/4 per unit.
For visitors. Okay, any comments on page 8? Okay, page 9. I have a comment. And I'm going to give you a good example. If you look at handicap parking, I won't use the new Circle K because I'm not sure about that one. But what you'll find is a designated parking space for a handicapped person to pull in. Now, if you're wheelchair bound, that's useless. He needs another 6 feet off the side of the vehicle so that he can get in and out of his vehicle. And we need to address that. Because another car parks alongside, let's say he got there and he got out of the van and he got in the store and another car came along and parked right alongside of him. Now he can't get back in his van.
I thought there's a standard, I thought all your handicap parking spaces, they either have a little concrete area when they open the door that they can get out on, or they have it striped on the pavement.
That's only if it's designated as a van accessible.
Right.
I thought they all had to have at least one van accessible.
The first handicap space, ADA space, has to be van accessible. If you have more than one that's required, then those can be, you know, not necessarily with that side area. I can't answer to the Circle K. I actually had, quite frankly, haven't even paid attention to it. I will do so the next time I'm over there. And I think bringing that up just kind of clicked in my head. We need to have a drawing or a sketch on this, similar to what we have in the back for the electric vehicle parking. But we'll come up with the design based on federal standards, and we'll add a drawing to that effect.
Great.
Well, the way you have this worded is you're going to have to comply with the ADA standards. And in addition, here are items 1 through 5 you're going to have to comply with. So I thought you kind of wrapped it all in using that language.
But I think we need a drawing. I think that would be helpful.
Drawing always is good. No,
Yeah.
I'm big on drawings.
Yeah.
Well, there's attorneys that goes around just looking for ADA violations.
Yeah,
suing
and
people.
that behavior got squashed.
Huh?
That behavior got squashed.
Yeah. There was a couple out of the Midwest that were doing that.
I was going to say, yeah, we really need to be careful when it goes.
Oh, I want to be careful on it, but I want to do it for the disabled person.
Oh, sure, yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm just,
Right.
I'm sorry, Bill, I don't mean to cut you
oh,
off.
I was just throwing it, I wasn't offended. No.
Okay, any other comments on page 9? along, page 10, seek and destroy. Any other comment?
Yes. I'm confused on the very top of the page under item 13A.
What page are you on? Street lighting under 13A. Oh, sorry.
It says, commercial and industrial uses requiring delivery shall observe minimum loading space accommodation. The heck is that?
I don't, oh, up here. That's the existing language, commercial.
I don't know what shall observe minimum loading space accommodation means. I couldn't figure it out. So it's just,
As far as dimensions, you mean?
as far as anything,
Well, it's not English. Commercial and industrial uses.
I don't know what a minimum loading space accommodation means. So that's just
Yeah.
just to clarify that, please.
Circle K, they just pull in and back across the parking lot.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a good question.
You know, there's no real,
LBN, they park right in the middle of the road.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no real unloading spot. They
Yeah,
just-
that's the existing language. We'll,
Everything there has, from B on, you've got very good dimensions and
Yeah.
whatnot, but that, I just couldn't figure out what it meant.
McDonald's,
we'll try to figure it out.
the parking spots right next to the building and park and take up
Good,
10
every-
parking spots.
Basically everywhere, yeah.
Well, and unfortunately, that's something that is missed in a lot of site plan reviews in a lot of communities, is making accommodations for loading and unloading without interfering with the flow of public traffic. And so we'll see what other kind of language we
We
can
don't
find.
get involved until there's at least 15,000 feet.
That's as far as, well, that's true. Yeah. Again, that's the way it's worded now.
Yeah. Well, do you remember or know off the top of your head what the size of the new Circle K is? How many square feet that one is?
I want to say 7,500? No, it's not that big.
That big,
No, I don't know.
4,000, 5,000.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like a good place to start.
Yes, it does.
Well, even on your example, at McDonald's, because they mess you up.
Mm-hmm.
So it says in A that they're going to observe it. We just got to give them some guidance so that they can observe it, I guess.
Okay, any other comments on page 10? Okay, page 11. Any comments?
Yes. Section 6, up near the top, that first sentence is a non-sentence. More than one use is located on a site and the gross floor areas of each use is less than the minimum for which the loading berths are required, but the aggregate gross floor area is greater than the minimum for which the loading berths are required, period.
That's a trick question.
That's the first time I've ever even read that one.
I read it 4 times thinking,
I don't have the slightest idea what that says.
I think it ties to the second, but it just needs some help.
There's a lot of things in this code that need help.
And then down under a J, paragraph J, the last sentence in there too, I struggled with. The number of loading berths providing for a major alteration or enlargement of a site or structure shall be in addition to the number existing prior to the alteration or enlargement. What if they've got enough there already? That just needs some work too.
Mm-hmm.
And then down under item 9, dimensions and circulation, it talks about the lines demarcating parking spaces shall be drawn on a rectangle 1 foot wide by 20 feet long.
I just wanted to get your attention on that one. We're going to be finding more good drawings or creating some drawings that show how parking, layouts are. These are just kind of a starting point. That one has actually been going into place in more and more communities, and it's pretty drastic. What that means is you have a 9-foot wide space. Dividing that space from the space next to it is a demarked 1 foot wide block.
And it's
So-
fully colored in, or is it 4?
No, it's just 4 lines, or 3 lines, demarking it. And what that does is, so many people, and we've all experienced this, can't hit the middle of a parking space to save their souls. And so what that does is it provides a buffer on either side of the vehicle for door opening.
And I agree with that completely, but the way this is worded, it's a 12-inch line.
Oh, okay.
It's not, as you described,
Yeah.
2 4-inch lines measured outside dimensions 12 inches.
And we'll clarify that. But that's going to be a little radical, but I think this is one that we ought to be putting a threshold of any parking lot requiring so many spaces or more. This is how they'll be laid out for the, because, we've all been through it.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. I have actually, this one I took from a code I wrote a few years ago, quite frankly, in Litchfield Park. And there's a brand new Fry's Marketplace Plaza there that they did this throughout, and people marvel at it. Every time, I've heard comments how much they like it, they appreciate it. It's easy to load their groceries in and out, or load groceries into their vehicles, get the kids in and out of the car seat in the back, and all that kind of thing. Would you want this for every little development? Probably not. Would you want it for medical offices? Probably not. I think it would be reserved primarily for commercial type centers. So I'll clarify that more. I just threw it in here to see if you would even consider it, quite frankly, and if you're comfortable with going that way, I'll put a threshold on it and we'll go with commercial areas.
Definite thumbs up for me.
Yeah.
And then I just put a note on this page. Nowhere in here do I see anything about garbage. And I know that the containers for commercial and industrial areas always end up in parking lots, and there's usually some sort of requirement for screening.
I think it's in the landscape code.
Okay.
I'll double check it. I think that's where
I
it's
just
at.
figured it's somewhere, but it's not here, and I just
Right.
wanted to make sure it's
Yes.
included.
Yeah, we have it.
Yeah, and it's part of our site plan evaluations then when a project comes through.
The other thing that later is on a later page here is the width of the aisles. And sometimes when you do that, those aisles that service the garbage trucks to come in and get those containers, they need to have a larger width because of turn radius and whatnot. So it all, like you said, there's a symbiotic relationship here. We just got to make sure that it's truly
They have to be able to maneuver. I don't know what they've done here in the past, but when I review site plans, brand new site plans, one of the things they have to bring me is that they have templates available based on the scale of your drawing that shows the maneuverability and turning radiuses of different sizes of vehicles.
Right.
And so I require those templates to be laid on the site plan so that we see that they will work.
Yes, as long as you're doing that,
Yep.
we're good. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
it's being addressed.
And we do the same thing with places that have loading bays, for diesel trucks or, for tractor trailer rigs or whatever. They need to identify what type of vehicle. We also will do that for fire apparatus circulation and even in residential developments. I've done residential developments where there was alley access for the parking, but they wanted to minimize it, for the aesthetics of the development itself. The developer actually had to buy the town at that point a specially built fire truck that could make the maneuvers that they wanted to adhere to. So they contributed, I forget what it was, about $450,000 to the town to buy a special design fire truck to be able to make the radiuses for that design. So I watch it very closely. Safety is number one.
Well, most of these are accessed by front load trucks, and those have the largest turning radius of all of them. So,
Correct.
Okay, any other comments on page 11? Moving right along, page 12.
yes. I just a question in my mind, just because of what I'm seeing lately, on the required aisle width in your chart up at the top of the page. And my only concern is it seems like with the leading, the Fords, the Chevrolets, and the Dodges of the world making these mega cab long bed trucks, I'm forever now driving through parking lots and here's a truck that sticks out. I'm just wondering if our dimensions are taking into consideration these longer trucks, and I see a proliferation in this area because of all the ranching and farming that occurs here.
Well, and the fifth wheels hauling RVs too.
I drive a long bed truck, and my headache is I can get into space, can't get out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just wanted to check the dimensions. that
Okay.
we're good for these.
A lot of communities, and quite frankly, I agree with you, but the norm that we were talking about is an 18-foot space, with bumper that allows for an overhang. So the all total space is 20 feet.
Yeah,
And what's happening these days, you're absolutely correct, is these longer vehicles, because I used to drive a 250 with an 8-foot bed and an extended cab. And I used to hang out all the time. And so I started parking at the other end of the lot just so I wouldn't inconvenience people. But you can't count on people being that polite. So I'm always happy to have a larger depth of space. It just usually get a certain amount of rebellion from people trying to do that because it caused extra paving in the site plan, and
Well, they're concentrating on a return on investment.
correct,
The more money you make them spend,
correct.
we could find ourselves pushing an investor below his willingness to actually make the investment.
And that's why you do PUDs, to allow them to make their case.
Right.
Right.
And it's not just the depth of the space, it's the aisle width.
Mm-hmm.
Make them maneuver to even get into the space.
Well, and that's one, the most efficient parking layout is 90 degree, as far as, maximizing your numbers. The easiest to maneuver is 45.
Yeah.
And there's, so it's you do have that constant battle on trying to, again, the economy of space versus maneuverability and practicality. But we'll take a look and see if there's any other examples out there and how they're handling them.
And most places I see the minimum aisle width is 24 feet.
Mm.
But that might even be old because I haven't looked at it for a while.
Yeah. As I noticed, what I run into all the time, I don't drive a big vehicle, I have an Expedition, so it's 16 and a half feet, 17 feet. It's probably not even that much. But it's always that guy on the other side who parks partway across the line.
Yeah.
And so then some guy pulls in with his extended cab pickup opposing him, and he's afraid to go up too far and butt him, so he's sticking 3 feet out into the aisle. That's...
Yeah, and he has a officially 2-foot hitch sticking out the back of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I've ripped up my knee on more than one of those.
That's it. That was just
Yeah,
kind of a
we'll take
question.
another look at it, see if we can find some other standards out there. And this is an area where we want to find some better graphics and things too.
And there has to be some common sense that after a certain size truck, you got no business in that parking lot.
I'm not sure how we deal with that one, but I don't disagree.
Yeah. Well, when we're looking at an investor, I'm sorry, I don't
No,
mean
it's
to
good.
cut you
It's
off.
good.
But when we're looking at an investor who is trying to lay out a parking lot and make a project work, we have to have some level of, this is the maximum size vehicle we expect finding in this parking lot, and how are we accommodating it? If it's 8 foot wide and 20 foot long, I don't think it belongs there.
It's kind of funny that a lot of parking lots that I go into now, I see spaces designated that says compact car only.
Those have been a incredible failure almost everywhere in the country where they have tried those.
I'm just wondering if we need some that says large truck only or something.
Well, some of these places do it. When I'm pulling a trailer, they have trailer parking.
Yeah, and that might be something on the larger developments that we look at, if not requiring, definitely recommending when they come in, and maybe give them some parking credit for it somehow. That's a good thought. But the small vehicle parking, what happens is those people in the small vehicles take advantage of the larger spaces and use them all up, and the small vehicle spaces sit there empty.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that has failed miserably all over the country.
Okay, any other comments on page 12?
No, I'm done.
Okay, page 13,
Yes, comments.
go.
The electric vehicle parking in A, B, and C, it talks about basically public parking, that it sounds like the municipality and its public works are going to be in charge of signage and installation and all this other stuff in public parking areas. And then we go down to part D, and then it's like it's required in private parking lots.
This was intended to be for public lots, for businesses to require, because of the way industry is changing, electric vehicles becoming more and more prevalent. One of the things that I was thinking on this one, we can either require it, just like we require handicap parking at some kind of percentage. That percentage at the bottom, this is something was cribbed from another code, and it really is kind of difficult to understand. We'd rather go to a one space per how many a regular. But this was for, like the Safeway. I'll keep using Safeway out there and Anthem as the example, where we would look at requiring charging stations out there that would be the responsibility of the developer. What we're finding out through research is what happens is they contact whoever the electric authority is for that property, APS or SRP or whoever, and they are more than willing to install the recharging stations because they're the ones, because they're operated by, debit card, credit card, or whatever, they're getting the money for it.
I agree completely. It's just,
Okay.
this language is kind of confusing.
Okay.
Part 2, it says, the Public Works Department shall place signs or markings.
Oh, it does, doesn't it?
And so it's like the top part of this talks about public parking areas that the town controls, and then part of it talks about the developers' private parking areas that they build and control. This just needs to be wordsmithed to.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, the intent was here for, because public, what I've found, like Wickenburg is a great example. There are 6 charging stations in Town Hall's parking lot that the town themselves initiated putting it in. I don't know if, I'm sure Phoenix and other places have it. I just don't go there because there's too many people and it's too congested. But the public portion of it, I see the town ultimately initiating that on our own. But I think for new developments of a certain, again, a threshold, certain size of a parking lot, certain number of cars, we ought to be looking at requiring something just to start, promoting the industry.
There's probably a national average ratio of electric cars to, or within a certain population where, there's probably some kind of statistic that you can base it on.
Okay.
Electric cars to internal combustion.
And I think that number's going to be fluid because with the new innovation of the electric cars, there's more and more of them on the streets every year.
Yeah.
I know, you got to start someplace.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the flex vehicles too, the EcoBoosts and all the different things that are out there that have a electric component to them.
And I also think
This area may even see a bigger influx now with that plant on the other side of Casa Grande.
Yeah,
back on track and
exactly.
going in. I think this part of the country is going to see a bigger influx in those.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that this part of the country is going to see a larger percentage of electrical vehicles as a whole because we don't have the weather that some of the northern parts do, where electric vehicles may not function as well in the winter.
Yeah,
where
flat.
we don't have that, and they work just fine all year long.
No, we'll do some more homework on this. We wanted to introduce it to you as a thought and be one of the first communities in Arizona to actually adopt an electric vehicle code. So we'll do some more homework on it and refine it.
Little old Florence.
That's all my comments.
Okay, any other comments on page 13? Page 14.
These drawings actually were cribbed, what community was it? Washington State? Yeah, okay. Yeah, these were drawings that were, plagiarism saves time. These are taken from a community in Washington State. And it seems to read pretty well, and we need to enlarge it some so you can actually read what the signs say, although it is kind of better defined on page 15 also for the signs.
Don't be afraid to take up the whole page.
Well, just for this portion, I'm looking at economy of scale. When we're doing the final product, we'll take up all the room we need.
Good, good.
Yeah. But this really covered a variety of different areas. And one of the things that I thought was interesting in this one, and I don't remember where it's at in this write-up exactly, but is that was a maximum amount of, like a built-in parking time, that you could only occupy the space for 2 hours, 4 hours, is it?
Hours in here.
Yeah, I knew it was in there somewhere. I wasn't sure which section or subsection, but the maximum, space so that somebody didn't get in there and take it over for the day.
Like the people who park at the gas pump and then go in the store.
Oh,
spend an hour shopping?
huge gripe of mine, especially with the new Circle K, because everybody's stocking up for their snacks for the day and their morning coffee, and they fill up with gas and then walk away. Now, some places I've seen them, turn on the gas pump, walk in, come back out, finish the sale and move. But yeah, when they're in there I filled up the other day, and I had vehicles in front of me and on adjacent sides that did not move, did not have a person in them the entire time. And if I were Circle K, I think I would be doing something, please pull forward, to after filling or whatever before making indoor purchase or something. It just makes sense for.
They'll get it eventually.
Yeah.
Any other comments on page 14?
This is just to make things work with the definitions on, down in G signage, second line from the bottom, electric vehicles probably should be capitalized, and electric vehicle charging station should be capitalized since they're defined terms.
Okay.
And then jumping on to page 15, the very first line there, it says electric vehicle. Probably should just capitalize that to conform that to the definitions as well.
Any other comments on page 15?
Oh, we just did it, didn't we?
Boy, you did.
Okay.
This is extraordinary. I really appreciate it. Then, Mr. Chair, we will just start going back and making some of these adjustments, doing a little bit more research. I would anticipate we won't be in a position to bring it to next week. That's a little quick to turn it over.
Just a heads up for the rest of the commissioners, I will not be here.
Okay.
I will be gone until the 13th of October.
And I will cover this in a little bit more detail on item 6.
So you won't be here next week for the regular meeting?
No, I will not.
Okay.
Yes, who gets
Okay, I need a motion to adjourn from the work session.
Motion to adjourn from study session back to regular session.
second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Moving right along. Future agenda items, information only. Staff will inform the commission of upcoming agenda items.
Well, as obviously the parking code will come back with a lot of these changes made to it and more detailed information, et cetera. I really don't think we could pull it together by next Thursday, though, and be complete and be comfortable with it. What I will do tomorrow, I believe that the draft sign code, which we've tweaked since the one that you saw before, is ready. So I will contact Mr. Burkhart in the morning and see if he feels that he would be prepared to go ahead and introduce you to that next Thursday.
Now, let me just stop you there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like we're trying to move this freight train faster than it should go. The commissioners need more time than that to get acquainted with the sign code.
Oh, absolutely.
The code actually requires some thought. I mean, it's one thing to read it, but it's another thing to kind of think about what it's really doing.
Okay.
And one of the areas that the town, commercial people in the town are very sensitive about is the sign code.
Absolutely.
Just get nuts. So I'd like to see us give the commissioners a little more time to get through the sign code.
Well, may I make a suggestion then?
Please.
At your concurrence, then we can go ahead and cancel next week's meeting since I have no action items.
Doesn't bother
And
me.
we could schedule this for the second meeting in October, although I will distribute the draft sometime next week. So you will have it several weeks in advance. It will still be handled as a work session. We are already starting on some stuff related to the lighting code. And again, these are all interconnected. And anyway, we'll not necessarily slow it down, but we will get more methodical about bringing these forward to you.
I think personally, I think that the work session can be much more productive.
Yes.
If people have had time to think about what they've read. So, yeah. And I don't know, you might have a schedule on the wall that you're you're trying to keep up with in order to meet 2020 or whatever?
No, no, it really doesn't directly relate to 2020.
Okay, then let's take our time, be
Okay.
methodical.
Excellent. We will take care of it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, and adding on to what Gary has said, something that was very helpful when we looked at this previously was some actual pictures
Yes.
of signs, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that would help me to understand exactly what the code is talking about and says this is a good situation, this is a bad, and this is why. So a really good PowerPoint presentation with actual examples,
Okay.
I think would be really helpful.
And we have also been working on specific, like in, layouts out of parking. We're doing the same thing with signs and trying to get a nice, consistent type of graphic that demonstrates wall sign and soffit signs and freestanding signs and things like that. So we can put that all together into a package. The other item, lighting code, like I mentioned, we're also working on that. The other item, as some of you are aware, there's been some controversy related to Caliente del Sol, related to setback issues. We had a joint meeting with their board and the town council this past Monday night and have reached I think, a very well thought out, comfortable, meets everybody's goals solution. I'm in the process of drafting the ordinance with those adjustments. We do have to go through the appropriate public process, so I have to take it through a community meeting with them first and be bringing it to you as a public hearing. But what I could also do is put this on as an informational item at the 4th, what would it be, the 19th? The second meeting in October. Bring it as an informational item to let you know what has been agreed upon, just so you have some familiarity. If you have any questions you can raise at that time that we can look into, be happy to do that. And in the meantime, we'll be setting up the required community meeting with Caliente and getting that out of the way. Hopefully, a best case scenario would be having a public hearing on November 1st. However, at the latest, I'd like to have it on November 15th. On the public hearing, and it kind of depends on their schedule in Caliente to have the public meeting. So, that's going to move forward, and I think so far we've gotten nothing but positive response. It was a very good meeting. Councilmember Hawkins was there in attendance, and we not only had the board, the council, we actually had some of the Caliente residents there, and the whole meeting was applauded when we were done.
Good. Well, kudos to you and Mr. Allen for putting the lid back on that can of worms. Much appreciated.
Right. The other thing, this probably isn't going to come back as an agenda item, but I might as well give you a heads up, just in case anything comes out of it. But we do have a new builder in town, not just D.R. Horton out at Anthem that you're familiar with already, but J. Carl Holm has bought 31 lots in the old, that I can never pronounce, over off of Adelaida, out here on Butte. Those vacant lots, there's the mobile home, manufactured home, right out there at Mulberry and Butte, and behind it there's a handful of houses that were built, but there's a bunch of vacant lots. They bought 31 of them, which is the majority of them, to build an entry-level, efficient what do they call it? Energy Star type of home out there. I think everything is good, but just to let you know, if there are any tweaks that have to happen that might come in front of you, we'll be doing that as expeditiously as possible. But they've actually submitted building plans.
Nice. Well, there's already a few homes out there.
Yeah, there's a handful already in there. So we think everything's good. The utilities are being used already.
That was quite controversial when it took place.
Yes, for some reason, manufactured homes were zoned for the front two banks, or the front bank of lots that back onto.
Well, it was all manufactured home, and then a developer came because the manufactured homes weren't.
Were already there.
Right, and so he bought up the land, and then it was a zoning change to allow him to put the stick-builts in there.
Well, we're going to get stick-builts.
You got one street that has a mobile home on one side of the street and stick-built on the other.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. In any event, I don't expect anything will come to you, but if it does, you'll know, in advance. That's it.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. I will do a quick call to the public. Call the public for public comment on issues within the jurisdiction of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Are there any public comments? I will close the call to the public and open call to the commission. Current events only, gentlemen. Are there any comments?
I think this would fall into this, but you can stop me and help me if it doesn't. One of the things that I noticed that we as a commission and me personally struggle with sometimes is making the proper motion to either agree with something that we're trying to do or disagree with it and tweak things to what we have discussed and tend to agree with. And I've seen in previous agendas with other organizations where they kind of give you some tutelage on each item that says, if you agree, this is the motion that you should say, so that it says what it needs to be said legally and all the other good stuff. And I'm wondering if we should embrace something like that.
Well, just to put something on the table for you, best practice when you're going to make a motion is to state why you're making the motion before you make it. Trying to think of an example.
Well, one of the things we could use is that the council does this in the council reports. They have a suggested motion and then consequences if the motion passes
Exactly.
X, Y, Z, and
Right.
yeah, and if the motion fails, then what are the result of that? And it's simple enough to add. We'd be happy to do that.
Well, it's
Just to keep us from stumbling and give us a good, correct, accurate motion.
And you can always modify it.
yeah. Well, and that's true. Vice Chair Frost could make a motion, but see that's why it is good practice to state why you're making the motion, the basis of your motion before you actually make the motion, because then I might want to modify that. And it may get modified again before it actually gets a second. So, and not only that, but it is a public meeting and it tells the public what your baseline is for making the motion in the first place. And then after the motion passes, then yeah, there should be some kind of a statement as to what just got passed. So, but we are completely off the agenda. So,
Point taken.
I'll close the call to the commission. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
We have a motion doing this properly. We have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt, second by Commissioner Frost, Vice Chair Commissioner Frost. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned.
I show 7:02.